Hello, my friends. Today the battles continue and the Russians are gradually advancing. Let's start with the Pokrovsk direction. Today they continue to assault Vozdvyzhenka and are trying to expand their control territory near Novoalexandrivka, the village of Progress, Novoselivka Pershe, Umanske, and Yasnobrodivka, near the village of Progress. The Russians have already entered the village of Vovche and fighting is reported there. Ukrainian forces report from the field that the Russians are making new gains overall. As we can see, the Russians are continuing their gradual advance. Despite having many successes in this direction of the front, reports indicate that they are bringing in fresh reserves, especially paratroopers, and it appears that the Russians are using maximum resources to be in a favorable position before any potential negotiations. However, if their reserves are exhausted and no negotiations occur, it could be a major failure for them. For now, we wait to see how events unfold. In the Toretsk direction, the situation remains challenging. Here, the Russians continue their attempts to break through to Panteleimonivka. Following their recent advances, they have come closer to the village, making it easier to assault. Additionally, fighting continues in the center of New York. In the Toretsk area, the Russians are trying to break through closer to Krymske. Battles are also ongoing in Pivnichne and Zalizne. The Russians are making progress here as well. Each day the situation worsens. The Russians keep pulling in reserves and the fighting continues. Up to 20 assaults are reported daily. In the direction of Chasiv Yar, the Russians continue their efforts to seize a large area along the southern flank. They have managed to extend the front line towards Bila Hora and are assaulting Ivanivske and Andriivka. There is a possibility that they will once again try to take control of the fields leading to the village of Stupochky. The Ukrainian armed forces understands the danger of the situation and are doing everything possible to repel the attacks. The Russians are also continuing their direct assaults on Chasiv Yar and are trying to expand their control territory from the forest plantation towards their highway. So far, the front line hasn't changed in the past day. Additionally, fighting on the northern flank also continues. Here, after their recent advances, the Russians have begun assaulting Orikhovo-Vasyukivka and Novomarkove. So this situation is difficult, but the fighting is fierce for every meter of land. In the Siversk direction, the Russians are also having successes and therefore increasing their activity. Assaults are being conducted on Verkhniokamyanske, Spirne, Vyimka, Pereizne, and Vasyukivka. Throughout the entire front line, heavy shelling continues without interruption. In the Kreminna direction, despite ongoing battles for Nevske and Terny and renewed fighting in the forest near Kreminna, there have been no changes along the front line. In the Svatove area, the Russians had some minor successes, but for now all attacks have ceased. The Russians are fortifying their new positions and bringing in additional reserves. Further south, fighting continues near the village of Makiivka, but here too the front line remains unchanged. In the Kupinsk direction, the recent advances by the Russians have created a grim situation. However, the Russians are currently regrouping, with assaults reported only near Synkivka and Petropavlivka. It remains to be seen if they have enough reserves to launch an operation to capture Kupiansk itself. But it's clear they are preparing for this possibility. In the Kharkiv direction, battles for Gliboke continue. While the village is largely under the control of the Russians, the Ukrainian forces are actively targeting them there. Additionally, there are reports of renewed Russian offensive actions near the border at Stotnytsky Kazachok. However, the Russians haven't been able to secure a foothold as the Ukrainian forces are repelling all attacks. In Vovchansk, the fighting continues as the Russians attempt to break through to Tykhe. Despite this, there have been no changes along the front line in the past 24 hours. In the Kurakhove direction, the Russians persist in their assaults on Krasnohorivka while also intensifying attacks on Paraskoviivka and the village of Kostiantynivka. Their directive is clear: hold positions at all costs and don't retreat. The Ukrainian forces are doing everything possible to maintain the defense, fighting for every meter of land. Even in critical situations, there are no orders to withdraw. The general staff is determined to prevent the Russians from advancing towards major cities. How successful this will be remains to be seen. Additionally, the Ukrainian forces released a video showcasing their defense against a massive Russian assault involving 57 pieces of equipment. Although I can't share the entire video due to its shocking content, it's clear that most of Russian equipment was destroyed using FPV drones. Let's continue. In the Vuhledar direction, the Shalon continues as the Russians establish a strong foothold to launch assaults on Vuhledar and Velika Novosilka and other villages. They are currently conducting Shalon while continuing to bring in reserves for these assaults. It's important to note that the Russians are able to advance due to the insufficient number of defense lines on the Ukrainian side. Despite the lack of a counteroffensive by the Ukrainian forces, the Russians are still constructing new defensive lines and reinforcing the ones they have already built. This makes breaching Russian defense lines very difficult. In the Zaporizhia direction, the Russians are attempting to storm Mala Tokmachka, but the Ukrainian forces are repelling them in the fields before they can reach the village. Therefore, there have been no changes along the front line. In the Kherson direction, Shalon of Kherson continues, and the General Staff reports ongoing fighting near Kozachi Laheri. While there are no major changes, the Russians are complaining that the Ukrainian forces are actively destroying them with FPV drones and they lack adequate protection. Greetings. It's not particularly pleasant to air dirty laundry in public, but we've had enough. Our commander, Lieutenant Colonel Anatoly Kazantsev of the 24th Regiment, doesn't allow us to use the electronic warfare systems provided by volunteers at our positions. Trench electronic warfare systems from volunteers help us deal with enemy FPV drones. We haven't received standard these systems like the Silok 01 we requested. So, in the most challenging moments, with FPV drones flying like flies, we are left without necessary protection, hoping for help from neighboring units against unmanned aerial vehicles. It's clear that the Ukrainian forces are continuing to decimate the Russian army despite these conditions. Meanwhile, Zelensky shared the results of Kuleba's visit to China.
Міністр закордонних справ Дмитро Кулеба, який цими днями із візитом в Китаї провів перемовини зі своїм колегою та доповів мені щодо результатів зустрічі. Візит українського посадовця на такому рівні вперше за багато років. І це добре. Є чіткий сигнал, що Китай підтримує територіальну цілісність та суверенітет України. А також було підтверджено і те, що мені говорив лідер Китаю Сі Цзіньпінь, що Китай не постачатиме зброю Росії. Детальну доповідь міністра я очікую по поверненню в Україну.
That's right. They want to supply weapons. They are already doing it, along with cars, motorcycles, and everything else. Meanwhile, Chairman of the Defense Committee, Kartapolov, commented on Ukraine's readiness for negotiations with Russia.
Что касается заявления Кулеба о готовности к переговорам, у них все равно нет другого выхода. И переговоры рано или поздно будут. Просто переговоры будут тогда, когда западные кураторы Украины будут готовы принять условия России. И здесь готовность или не готовность Украины – это вопрос далеко не первостепенный. Если им скажут, они, естественно, пойдут на переговоры. Но для нас переговоры нужны будут тогда, когда на них будут зафиксированы наши условия и наша позиция. Ни при каких других обстоятельствах мы никакие переговоры не пойдем.
Clearly, the Russians feel confident on the battlefield and want the war to end on their terms. To calm the Russians a bit, it was reported that late yesterday evening, another drone attack began on the Kursk and Belgorod regions. By evening, they had reportedly shot down 12 drones. We're still waiting for the final results. It's also reported that China is ready to act as a mediator in the negotiations. After meeting with the Ukrainian Foreign Minister Kuleba, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi stated that China is ready to act as a mediator in peace negotiations between Russia and Ukraine, according to Radio Svoboda. Although the conditions and timing are not yet ripe, we support all efforts that contribute to peace and are ready to play a constructive role in ending the conflict and resuming peace talks, Wang Yi said. He emphasized that all conflicts ultimately end at the negotiation table. This is all good, but the process is dragging on too long. People are dying every day. What do you think about this? You can leave your thoughts in the comments. And that's all from me. So please, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on all the latest news. Thank you for watching, and see you next time. Bye-bye.